Okay, so the next technique that we'll look at is workshops. So workshops is a pretty straightforward technique, um, self-explanatory one. This is where we collaborate with different stakeholders to achieve a predefined goal, right? And um, so it's a focused event where you have like people from uh, uh, different upstreams, downstreams, and subject matter experts, and all of them working together. Okay, and then the purpose includes planning, analysis, designing, scoping, modeling, or it could be a combination of any of these. And so basically, you get into a workshop with a goal, and the role of a business analyst is mostly facilitating and also guiding the discussion throughout the workshop. Okay, so when we are looking at workshops, so the first thing is obviously we have to prepare for the workshop, where we define the purpose and the desired outcome. So we identify the key stakeholders that need to participate in the workshop. Then we identify the agenda and the outputs, and obviously, so we are responsible for all the logistics, etc. And workshop roles. So you need to identify who are the key stakeholders. For example, who is the sponsor, who will play the role of facilitator, who will be the scribe, who will be the timekeeper, and all of this. Okay, so scribe is somebody who will kind of help you with taking notes. Timekeeper is someone who will keep a tab on the time. And then you focus with the workshop. Okay, you focus with the workshop. Once again. Okay, so you focus with the workshop, and then you look at what are the desired results that you want to achieve from the workshop. So some key things to focus here is you need to ensure that the workshop has a respectful environment where each other's opinions are respected. Encourage everyone to contribute during the workshop, and any discussion that is off topic, right, should be specific, should be time bound. So the timekeeper should be able to tell you or advise you on that. Discuss about issues and not the people. Um, and then post workshops, obviously, just like any other important meeting, we send out minutes of the meetings. Okay, so these are the key things that we need to make a note of in workshops. The other thing, other important thing that will guide is how you're asking good questions. So that's something we'll cover in the elicitation um, session. Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward technique. Not much of details are required here. Okay, so the next one is data dictionary. This is again simple and easy to understand technique. So when we are working on a new project, right, we often come across a lot of data elements. So we standardize and define each of these data elements so that everyone has a common or shared understanding of these data elements, right? Um, so we'll probably look at an example to understand a bit more on this data dictionary technique. Just give me a second. It's a pretty straightforward technique that's easy to understand. Okay, so you define so different elements, and then the description of it, data type, the length of it, what are the acceptable values, whether it's mandatory or optional, nullable or not, and then the whether it's a composite key or not. Okay, so for example, let's say you have the date of birth. Okay. Okay, then you have let's say you have customer number, and then you have account number. Okay, so date of birth, DOB is date of birth, we know. Then data type is date. Okay, so length, again, it could be, so let's say 8 characters, and acceptable values, only dates, you can see. Mandatory or optional, you can say mandatory. And nullable, so you can decide no. Whether it's a composite key, no, right? So composite key is a combination of multiple data elements, so no. Then the customer number is a unique identifier for each customer. Then data type, so you can define, so you can say, okay, it is an integer, or you can say whether it's a varchar. Okay, and then you can define what is the length, acceptable values, so alpha numeric, mandatory, no, and not composite, right? And so account number, you may say, okay, you will derive the account number. Account number will be a combination of date of birth and customer number. Okay, for example, so that's the way. Okay, a unique account number for transferring money. Okay, and then this could be a varchar, and then maybe you will say 32, again alphanumeric, mandatory, and composite key, yes. And then you can say DOB plus customer number.
Ravi, what is composite key?
Yeah, so composite key, account number is the composite key because it is a combination of date of birth and customer number. Okay, so for example, the date of birth is, let's say 10th August 2010. Okay, and the unique account number is 5645321. Then your account number will be so this is the composite key. Composite key is a key which is derived from one or more data elements, more than one data elements.
Okay.
Okay, so this is again a simple and easy to understand technique. Okay, so the next one is, yeah, so this is the last technique where it's about decision modeling. So decision modeling is again another, is part of UML modeling. So we looked at concept model, we looked at use case modeling, then decision modeling is another technique under the UML umbrella. So this is where, so when you have to make decisions, which are repeatable in nature, then you use decision modeling. Okay, so more about, so let's say you have a process for your operations team, or if you have a process for your support team, any process that is more repeatable in nature, right? You create a decision model to explain that. Okay. So we'll look at some examples. What I'm showing on the screen, is it audible for you guys? I mean, sorry, is it visible?
Yeah, yes, Ravi.
Yeah. Okay. So here there are, so the first thing we need to look at is this one, where, so whenever we are creating a decision model, right? So you can create a simple decision model. So this is an example of a simple decision model, and this is an example of a complex decision model. And it's a good practice to actually document the decision modeling approach, which means what is the underlying source or knowledge that you have used to come up with these models. Okay, so that tomorrow, if somebody questions these models, right, you have a base to explain. Okay, so which is why it's important to design the decision modeling approach before. So let's say this is your decision. So your decision, so when you're modeling this decision, you need input data. So whatever is going into the decision, and then knowledge of business process, right? And so you need to document what are your input data sources, whether are they coming from your customers, or are they coming from some system specifications, etc., or some previous business process, etc. And business knowledge sources, from where are you extracting the knowledge required to create this decision model. So you need to document all the sources so that you can use them as a reference tomorrow, let's say in the future, if some regulator requests for it. Okay, so we look at this a bit more in detail. Okay, so what you see on the screen is a simple decision model first. So for example, let's say we take the same net banking solution, and we want to decide if a customer is eligible for same day transfer or not. Okay, then we see, and then we have two factors which decide. So one is transfer amount and the bank. Okay, so whether the amount is less than or equals to 1 lakh or greater than 1 lakh. So 1 lakh is the extreme boundary, and so you decide. So here, let's say if we look at this decision model, right? So if the transfer amount is less than or equals to 1 lakh and it belongs to the same bank, then it's eligible. Okay, then okay, then we can say if it's greater than 1 lakh and it belongs to the same bank, then even then it's eligible. If it's less than 1 lakh and then it belongs to the same bank, it belongs to the other bank, then it's still eligible. And if it's greater than 1 lakh and then other banks, so same day credit, it's not eligible. Okay, so this is an example of a simple decision model. But let's say if you want a few more parameters to be included, let's say you want to include the payment method as well. So you want to define eligibility rules for different payment methods separately. Okay, then you can design a complex decision model, something similar to this, where you create branches to segregate your decision model. Okay, so here, so you have the amount, and then the amount is branched out, and then you have banks, and the bank is branched out into same bank and different bank. Then it goes to the payment method. The payment method is again branched out into IMPS and NEFT to decide the eligibility or non-eligibility. Okay, so this is a simple example. Again, it falls under the UML umbrella. Okay, so that's the end of the BA techniques. So there are a few more other techniques like interviewing or questionnaire, sending questionnaires or brainstorming and all of that. So these are like pretty common techniques which we use for elicitation. Okay. So and they are mostly self-explanatory, but these are the ones where you need like more information. So I've covered them. I'll also see if I can send you some notes on these techniques so that you can refer. But maybe I'll pause for a minute to check if you have any questions on any of these techniques. Any questions? No?
No questions, Ravi.
Okay. Yeah, so then we'll look at the mappings. Presenting my screen. Okay, so this was the mapping spreadsheet that I mentioned yesterday. So you'll have like 6 different knowledge areas. And so knowledge areas you can consider more of like different stages of SDLC. So where the first one is where you plan for your requirements. Okay, so where you're planning, deciding on the business analysis approach, and then you're planning how you will recreate requirements and monitor them. Second is then you start the elicitation and gathering requirements. Then third deals with how you manage your requirements and how you communicate these requirements. And then fourth is enterprise analysis, which deals with analysis of all the upstreams and downstreams and the architecture, high level architecture, etc. So all of that is covered here. Then you do the detailed requirement analysis. So at this stage, you have your requirements documented, and then you prioritize them, and then you verify the requirements and all of that. Then finally, you come up with the solution, and then you assess and validate the solution. Okay, so this is a typical SDLC that's followed in Waterfall. So as a business analyst, we normally don't follow this sequence. Okay, so for example, in requirement analysis, so you have so many steps, right? For example, finalize what is your business analysis approach. Okay, then create a list of your stakeholders and responsibilities, create a business analysis plan, create a BA communication plan. So this was there like several years ago. So we used to follow this approach, but now especially when we are following Agile, right? So we directly jump into gathering requirements, because your BA approach is, whether you want to follow Agile or Waterfall, is already pre-decided, right? So you don't do it for every project. Okay, so every small enhancement that you'll be working on. So we directly jump into gathering requirements, creating user stories and all of that. So it's a mix and match. But this template is quite useful when you want to know, okay, so if you are at a particular stage, right, in your business analysis, and you want to know what are the different techniques that are available to me, then you can look up in this template. Okay, so for example, when you want to conduct stakeholder analysis, right, so you will know what are the different techniques that you can use to conduct stakeholder analysis. Okay, similarly, so when you are in the elicitation phase and you're gathering requirements, then you know what are the different techniques that you can use to conduct elicitation. Okay. And then when you're in the requirement management or communication phase, so you know what are the different techniques that you can. So this is more like a repository that you can use to understand more about requirements and then um, communicate and then prioritize the requirements. Um, so if you look at what we're expecting in each of these is okay. So most of them are not relevant anymore, especially because we are following the Scrum process. So the BA approach or the stakeholder list, BA plan, BA communication plan, requirement management plan, the BA process, it's like the ratio or any of the tools, etc. And then you look at the elicitation. So the output would be elicitation results, the requirements, okay, and the stakeholder concerns, etc. All of this would be the outputs. And requirement management and communication. So you have your requirements and then you document them whether they are approved or you have traceability or not, and then all of that is documented. Then you look at the enterprise analysis. So here we look at what is the overall need of a business at an enterprise level, the what is the capability that's required at an enterprise level, then the solution approach, the solution scope, and the business case. Okay, so all of these would be covered in your enterprise analysis. And requirement analysis is where you got your requirements signed off, and then you prioritize your requirements and you document your assumptions and constraints for the requirements. Finally, we have the solution. So again, in solutions, let's say if you want to validate a solution, you are validating a solution and you want to know what are the different techniques that you can use to validate a solution, you can come and refer in this Excel sheet and you know there are different techniques that you can use. Okay, so this is something that I've already copied into the shared drive, which you can use as a reference. Okay, any questions?
So Ravi, this is mapping seems to be more of a kind of what I will say theoretical kind of. So how do we relate it so that we know exactly how means where to use which one, and because there is no hard and fast rule for this, so there is a kind of confusion regarding where to use which one to leave, which one to adopt.
So this is again that will come with practice, right? So for example, for someone like me, I don't need to look at these templates, so it comes with practice. But for you, when you're starting off, right? So this is more like a guideline that, okay, if I'm at this stage, I know these are the possible techniques, and then you know which you decide like which technique to use by experimenting with like different techniques. So for example, let's say you're in the requirement elicitation phase, okay, and you have to go to the users and gather requirements, okay. So you won't go and click here, right? It's enterprise analysis or requirement analysis or solution assessment, because you know you didn't reach that stage yet. Okay, so you go and click on the elicitation tab. Then what do you want to do? So you want to conduct elicitation activity. Okay, so when I have to conduct elicitation activity, I come here and I see, okay, so there are different techniques that I have and I can use. For example, you have the interface analysis. Okay, so you don't use interface analysis unless you're dealing with interface related requirements, right? For example, so you don't use like surveys and questionnaires when you have good understanding of the project. So you use surveys and questionnaires to gain good understanding of the subject or process, correct? So these are some things that you will learn with practice and experience. But at least you will know that, okay, so these are some of the techniques that are available. You are not like left open in the world where you don't know what are the available techniques. So you just need to pick up and then see how it works. So maybe let's say you're gathering requirements, then you go and you didn't know that, okay, service and questionnaires you should use when you don't know much about the project. Okay, then you go and directly start with brainstorming, right? And then you face a bad experience, then you realize, okay, that brainstorming is not the right technique for me when I don't know much about the project. Then you explore service and questionnaires. Okay, or if you're still confused, right, when you're actually working and you are in a difficult position, just message me. I can guide you what is the technique that you need, because it's in real world, right? It's really complex, so we need to really understand what is the current situation and the background of the project. Because sometimes what happens is, I may say that you can use service and questionnaires, but your stakeholders may be like really super busy, right? And they will say, okay, I don't have time to reply to questionnaires. Okay, I have only 5 minutes for you to gather requirements. I can't fill up questionnaires because I am super busy. So you can't really fix up a hard and fast rule.
So just can you just explain this phases actually, so that I can relate it to a project like requirement planning, elicitation, management, how they are different? Because requirement planning and requirement management kind of looks similar. So just wanted to know on kind of how 2 lines, like how does it differentiate?
Okay, so these are like in sequence, Anshuman. So for example, so your project, though in Scrum, I mean, we don't really follow these exact phases, but overall, when you have to deliver a change, right, you follow this sequence. So requirement planning and monitoring. So you will look at, okay, so it's more about preparation for before you start the requirement gathering, right? So your stakeholder analysis, for example, understanding who are part of your stakeholder project, and then creating that stakeholder mapping, stakeholder list, stakeholder personas, mapping their interest versus influence, and all of that will come under the requirement planning and monitoring. Okay. For example, where do you want to create your requirements? Okay, so will you create a BRD, or will you create a user story? Will you create a BRD and convert it into FSD? So all of that is in the first phase, requirement planning and monitoring. Okay, when you actually kick off the requirement
So,
gathering.
just one thing here. So here, like it is just related. Requirement planning is monitoring is related to us. How we are going means what is the planning process and what is the prerequisite before starting the process.
Yeah, correct. Before you
Okay.
go to the user and start gathering requirements.
Okay. Okay, then the
Yeah, so then we go to the elicitation. This is where you start the requirement gathering. Okay, so if you look at the outputs, right? So you'll see, okay, elicitation results, then you have the requirements and all of this. Okay, this is a phase where you gather requirements. Okay, the third one is after you finished gathering requirements, then you manage the requirements and communicate the requirements, get the sign off on the requirements, right? So that phase is the requirements management and communication phase.
Okay. So Ravi, generally if you talk about these various phases of requirement gathering, what kind of question generally asked by the interviewer?
Oh, in interview, nobody will ask you to explain what are the 6 knowledge areas or 5 knowledge areas. So in interview, there are like various other questions that are asked. So we'll go into details probably like in this session, so we can kick off like maybe a few questions. and look at it. So we'll cover. So we have like BA process related questions and BA situational questions. So we'll cover both of them in that.
So this elicitation process means where we will be gathering the requirement. Are we going to do any kind of example on this so that we kind of know exactly how to go ahead with it?
Yeah, so this is so elicitation is mostly about asking good questions, right, Anshuman? So we'll cover that in when we are going through the elicitation. So there is one day which is dedicated for elicitation. So one session fully dedicated for elicitation.
Yeah, because I think among these 4 that we have now, elicitation is the most important from a
Yeah.
BA perspective.
Yeah, correct. So that will define a good BA versus a bad BA.
Okay, so you told requirement management is more of a communication to the stakeholder for closing means getting a sign off kind of. And what is the last one? Enterprise?
No, this is not the last one. So you have like few more. So enterprise analysis. So now you document the requirements, right? So you communicate, you got this sign off. Enterprise analysis is more about, okay, so I have my application or my project, which is going to change. What is the impact on the overall organization? Okay, so you look at you look at the big picture. So enterprise is nothing but across applications or across projects. What is the impact, right? And
Okay,
then
so it's like previous and current. What is the difference? What is the implication and what is the gap kind of?
so that you must have already done for the at an application level. Here you're doing it at chain level.
Okay, it's in a bigger model.
Yeah. Right. So you engage your enterprise architect team, and then so you have your requirements done, right? Then you engage your enterprise architects, and then you take them through these requirements and ask them what is the impact at an organization level if you go ahead with these requirements. Okay.
Okay, so it's more of a team perspective that we should be taking up from enterprise level.
Yeah, correct. So you will discuss what is the business need, what is the required capability, what is the solution approach and solution scope, and all of these when you're going through the enterprise analysis, more at a chain level and not at an individual application level.
So it will be more of a report kind of a structure that we have to kind of take it off on a higher level kind of. Okay. And then the requirement analysis. Okay.
Yeah, so this is where you will organize your requirements and you will prioritize which one you have to deliver. And then you will define what are the various assumptions and constraints and all of that. And then you have your requirements verified. So kind of you will
backlog
dig a
we
bit
can
more
say.
Deeper. Yeah. Before solutioning, right? So you will dig a bit more deeper about the requirements and analyze them.
So is it similar to kind of backlog management in JIRA?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's right. So you add backlog refinement. So backlog management is the old term. So now it's called backlog refinement. Yeah, so you can think of more like backlog refinement where you added the feature and then you add more details into it, right? So that's
and prioritize it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And this one is 6th one is
this is where you created your solution and then you validate your solution with the users. So for example, let's say if you're designing a web application, you created a mock-up. Okay, so you created
kind of a UAT
or MVP. No, it's not UATs. It's more about, so you can, even UAT is one of the solution assessment and validation, but it's more of, it could be like validating your design prototypes and all of that as well. So if you're not,
is it before UAT or in the process of UAT? How exactly is this?
So UAT can also be one of the solution assessment and validation technique. But normally we do prototypes and MVPs before we actually give to the end user for UAT. But UAT is also one of the ways to validate the solution.
Okay. Fine.
Okay, so that's on the BA techniques. Okay, I'm just sharing my screen for the next topic. Okay, so this is where we'll cover the elicitation, Anshuman, that I was telling, right? So we'll cover more on the elicitation techniques. So we'll look at some of the process interview questions because we have completed a lot about the process, right? So I'll maybe start off with some simple examples and then we'll look at more complex ones. Okay. Okay, so maybe we'll start off with something simple. What are the different Scrum ceremonies that you followed? Okay, so this could be one of the questions. So can you explain your Scrum process? Can anyone give an attempt?
Sorry, right, can you repeat the question again?
So
Okay,
what
it's
are the,
clear.
so you said, so for example, you said you follow Agile or Scrum in your project, right? Can you explain any flow? So I have a feature or requirement in the backlog. Can you explain what exactly happens from then?
Okay, in Agile ceremony, we get the requirements from the product owner.
Mhm,
Then we write the user stories
mhm,
with getting information from the end user perspective.
mhm,
We document them, creating user stories. Then at the same time, we also write acceptance criteria,
mhm,
which will make understand for the development team to convert them to technical solution.
mhm.
So this will go in a sprint wise.
Yeah. So so what is that event called? So where you do all of this
Yeah,
writing?
so this is a sprint backlog we call ceremonies.
Okay.
So that's that we call sprint planning, Ravi.
Okay. So can someone try to explain it in like sequence?
So the first one
Got it.
is sprint planning. Second one is daily Scrum meeting.
No. Before sprint planning, so you'll have one more.
Product backlog.
Product backlog
Backlog
refinement.
Yeah.
refinement.
Product backlog refinement. Yeah. So
Uh, then
yeah.
we have sprint review.
Yeah. So the product owner and the development team will prioritize which are the requirements as to go first priority in each sprint. So the product refinement phase will take place in that. So upon that, the sprint backlog team will decide which are the requirements as to go in each sprint based on the priority. So as per my understanding, is this correct?
Okay. So this is what you gave is good information, Mavisha, but this is not sufficient for
Okay.
interview. Okay. So at least so it's not very structured. Maybe people will expect more. Can anyone else give it a try?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
Yes, so you wanted me to tell, you wanted the Scrum ceremonies, right?
Yeah. So maybe how the flow of Scrum ceremonies. Yeah. How does the requirement flow? From the time it gets added to the product backlog and.
Yeah, after the project backlog, it is prioritized, and once the user stories are ready to go to the sprint, it would be like sprint, daily scrum, the sprint planning, the sprint review, and the sprint retro. So basically, a sprint is normally between like 1 to 4 weeks. So it's a time box effort where it is also known as like iteration. So, and we have the daily scrum, which is one of the scrum ceremonies. It is a short meeting held every day for its time box to 15 minutes. So where the members give status updates on accomplishments from the day before and for the day and how they are progressing towards their goal. And the sprint planning is a Scrum framework where team determines the product backlog, work items they will work on during that sprint, and discuss their initial plan for completing each prioritized work item. So these work items could be epics, features, user stories, or tasks. So that's the sprint planning, and it's an agreement between the product owner and the Scrum team. So the sprint review is again a ceremony that takes place after the sprint ends. So during the sprint review, the product owner explains what was accomplished in the last sprint and the status update of the product roadmap. So the sprint review is nothing but whatever you have done. So it's a demo that you are going to showcase to the stakeholders or the end user. So, and in the sprint retrospective, finally, the ceremony is held after the sprint review at the end of each sprint. So the goal of this session is to give the Scrum team an opportunity to self-assess and create a plan for improvements for the next sprint and beyond. So you'll discuss about what went well and what didn't go well. So, and what can be worked to get things better. So you keep repeating what went well and you will discuss about what didn't go well.
Yeah.
I think that is a brief recap of all the Scrum ceremonies.
Yeah, perfect actually. So that's a good explanation, Ritika. And so can everyone do me a favor? Can you just rewind the Agile Foundation class, maybe, and then so we'll revisit this question once again, because we need to. This is a very important question, and if you're not able to logically explain this right in a sequence, it's very difficult for the interviewer to believe that you worked in Scrum. Okay. So maybe just go through that 1 hour session on Agile Foundation. We'll revisit this again in the next session. Okay, when we look at the interviews. Okay, so I'll mark this as in a different color. Maybe I'll mark this as orange.
So Ravi, we can also add the DOD also, right?
Yeah, all of that. So there are like a lot of things we need to explain it in a connected fashion. So Ritika has covered like 99% of it, but so if I have to repeat everything, right? So again, I need another 1 hour to explain all of that. Okay, so if you can go through the Agile Foundation and then, so that will help you to answer this question pretty easily. Okay, so the next one is share your screen and write a user story. I think most of you will be able to write now, right? Because you have practical experience. But what is more important is, so you need to write a user story related to your project. Okay, so that's something we'll see more when we are creating your CV, right? So I'll tell you which specific requirement you should take to write a user story. Okay, so this is something I'll mark it as green. So how do you handle a challenging stakeholder? This is something we'll look at. Okay, so the next one is probably an easy one, would be what business analysis artifacts did you prepare? Can somebody try this?
Ravi, may I try this one?
Yeah. Yeah, Pooja. Hello? Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I think
Yeah,
there's some
yeah.
issue with the connection. So I said we gather all the requirements and we update artifacts in BRD and FSC are the two artifacts that we created.
Okay. So what are the other artifacts that you'll prepare as a business analyst at various stages?
So,
Ravi, is it to Agile or it is like Waterfall? Like, will they ask
I mean, in
any
general, so
interview?
you can like combine both of them and say, okay, so let's say in Waterfall, right? What did you create?
Okay, if they ask that question, then I will tell that as Pooja mentioned, BRD and FST, traceability matrix.
Mhm.
And one more thing is, sorry, I'm not able to recall the have to watch.
so it's like user stories, then
I'm showing them some of them on the screen.
sorry,
I'm showing some of them on the screen as a hint.
non-functional and functional requirements also.
Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, Ravi.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
so
gap analysis and test case project and
yeah, so you need to explain all of them because this is a really good opportunity for you to prove yourself, right? And so when somebody asks you, okay, so what are the different artifacts that you prepared? So you need to explain all the artifacts that we looked at in the artifact session. Okay, so a typical in Agile, right? So you will prepare a user story, correct? So you'll prepare a user story, you'll write acceptance criteria in Gherkin format. So you will write given, when, then, and then you will create BRD, you will convert it into FSD in a waterfall structure. You will maintain traceability metrics, right? So when you follow Scrum and Agile, so you maintain traceability automatically in JIRA. When you create acceptance criteria, it generates test cases. Otherwise, if you don't follow JIRA, you can say you create a traceability metrics in Excel spreadsheet, right? And then you can prepare a business case if you're if you're requesting for any funding or if your project is at the initial inception phase, correct? So that's one thing that you can say, okay? Or if you want to uh, change something or change something on to an existing system, so you can perform gap analysis, okay, after a change has gone live, so you can prepare lessons learned. And then when you're new to a project, so you'll prepare the stakeholder list, persona, and power interest profile, right? And then you decide the strategy. Even that is a BA artifact. Okay, so then you prepare the RACI chart. So who's responsible, accountable, right? And all of that. So we created a RACI chart, right? So yeah, we looked at one of the artifacts. So all these you should explain in the interview. Okay, so if you just say, because what happens is when you're able to answer the questions that we know with perfection, right? And sometimes in the interview you get questions that you don't know, so it will really uh, help your interviewer to make a decision, right? If you're able to answer these known and common questions, because so this is not a list that I just created just randomly, right? So these are the exact questions that people asked in the interview for the people whom I mentored previously. So this is a real set of questions picked up from interviews that people keep asking every time. Okay, so let's look at.
So Ravi, here there is some mention on onion diagram and all those. So is it required to?
No, you don't need to mention, but at least like you should not be telling, okay, so what artifacts did you prepare? I prepared BRD and FSD, right? So that gives a wrong impression to the interviewer that, okay, so you don't know anything except for BRD or FSD. You should explain like at least 6 to 7 artifacts that you prepared. And you should use that opportunity to add like more details. For example, you can say when the interviewer asks, okay, what artifacts did you prepare in Agile? So you can say user story, right? But if I was in the interview, because I want to show to the interviewer that I know a lot about user story, right? So then I will say I prepare user stories, so wherein I document the acceptance criteria in Gherkin format. So I use given, when, then, okay? And then I prepare the requirement traceability matrix. And some of the projects I worked in, they also followed Agile. So where I created the business requirements document, then I converted them into functional specification documents. A BRD talks about what is required, and an FSD talks about how you actually fulfill the business need. And then I prepare gap analysis. So whenever I need to understand the gap between to be and as is, and also design how to minimize that gap and workarounds, etc. So if I'm working on a vendor assessment, so I also look at preparing RFPs and RFI and RFQs. Then I also prepare the requirement traceability metrics, right? So you need to be able to explain all of these like in detail, okay? Because that's a good opportunity to showcase. If I am an interviewer and then I ask you, okay, what BA artifacts did you complete, right? And if you say, okay, I prepared BRD and FSD, just like two words, right? There is, I would not even proceed with the interview. So there is a very likely chance that the interviewer must have already made up his mind to reject you, because you worked as a business analyst for so many years, and then when I ask you, okay, what artifacts did you prepare, you're not able to talk beyond 2 words, right? So that's where we need to improve. Okay, so we'll look at a few more questions. So again, so we'll revisit this. So just go through the BA artifact section once again, and we can cover. Then so maybe we look at something simple. So what is the definition of done? Can anyone try?
So
So
definition
this
of
is
done.
yeah, but it's good if everyone can participate, because what happens, right? If you don't, it's better to answer incorrectly on this call than an interview, right? So if you answer incorrectly on this call, right, I'm there to correct you, okay? And but if you answer incorrectly in an interview, right, that mistake will be a very costly mistake, because you are actually working out to transition into a BA role, right? So you get like few opportunities, and then if you don't capitalize on those opportunities, right? So if you answer some basic questions like these incorrectly, it will be a costly mistake. So better you answer incorrectly on this session so that I can correct you, and then you answer like really well in the interview.
So,
Yeah.
so definition of done is like the selected set of items that we have agreed upon means that we can take up, that once this is completed, the means user stories. Once this is completed, then we can take it up as done. That is the definition of done.
Okay. Yeah. So that's not a bad answer. Anyone else who wants to try?
Yeah. So definition of done is a agreement, working agreement within the team. So we consider a user story as definition of done once it passes the acceptance criteria.
Yeah, so that's a very good keyword that you used, Vijay. So it's a lot of people think that definition of done is created by the Scrum Master. Okay, so it is a working agreement by the team, by the Scrum team on, so you meet these criteria and then we move the story to done. Okay, so then the next question when you explain, right? So if I'm interviewing you, you tell what is definition of done. Okay, can you tell me the definition of done that you have for your sprint? So what is the definition of done that you're following for your sprint in your project?
So definition of done, I mean, we consider once all the user stories are completed and passes the acceptance criteria, and software is working as expected and accepted by the product owner.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain. So each project can have a different definition of done. Okay, so that's important to remember. So your definition of done could be like when a story or a feature is tested and signed off by the business user and it's ready to go live, right? Then you can say the story is done. Okay, or in some projects they put a definition of done where, okay, so after testing is completed before UAT, so you can call it as definition of done, or maybe UAT is signed off, then it's definition of done. Or some projects they will say definition of done is only when the product can be released immediately into the production. That is definition of done. Okay, so you have to decide what kind of project you have and you should explain what is the definition of done you have in your project. But what Vijay explained is a perfect example. So the interviewer would certainly accept that as an answer.
Ravi, does this scenarios differ when we have a kind of means how does it differ? Like, is it in product based or service based or domain based? How does this question or company based? How does this exact answer differ on?
So this differs on your project. So within the same product company, right? Each Scrum team can define their own way of definition of done. Okay, so it depends. So the logic is simple, right? So when can you know that the story is done? Okay, so when can you move that the story is done and you don't need to do anything more on that? Okay, so that's the definition of done. For example, let's say if you go to a buffet, right? You go to a buffet, you start with starters and then you start with main course, then you have dessert, then you have pan at the end, right? So for some people, the definition of done is okay. So you go through all of this, so you finish eating the pan, then it's definition of done. Some people, they only eat starters, okay? And they say, okay, that is definition of done. So it is something that you define with your team. For example, if your team is only into testing, okay, there is no development at all. Your team is only a testing team, right? So can you have a definition of done where you say, okay, the software is implemented in production or releasable product? No, right? So your definition of done would be completed testing, walk through the test results with the end users have signed off. Okay, that is my definition of done. Okay, so if you're a product team, then your definition of done will most likely be where the user story is developed and it is ready to be shipped into production. Okay, a shippable or releasable product which is reviewed or demoed to the end user and accepted, right? Accepted by the end user and the product owner, which is ready to be released into production at any time. That is a definition of done, mostly in a product-based company.
Okay.
So this is something is commonly asked again. So user stories and acceptance criteria. So we know this. So in acceptance criteria, people will ask you like, so what is Gherkin format? How do you write acceptance criteria and all of that? So you should be able to explain. So this is something we did. Okay, so the next one is people will ask you, what is the difference between a BRD and an FSD? Can anyone explain what is the difference between a BRD and an FSD? Very commonly asked question again.
So the difference between BRD and FRD is, so BRD is the plain user requirement. So that could be in simple way, but when we just write down the functional requirement document, it will say how we are going to achieve this requirement in in system. For example, we have to configure a user, we have to create a user functionality. So we'll write it down various steps and various rule around that.
Yeah, yeah, correct. So anyone else wants to try?
So is it audible? Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so FRD, okay, BRD is like a high level requirement
Mhm.
from the stakeholders' point of view. And FRD is a technical document that is developed from the BRD.
Okay. So what goes into an FSD or an FRD? So can you explain with an example?
So BRD is like normal layman language kind of a scenario, and FRD is FSD is like UMLs, technical diagrams, data flows, all those.
Okay. So the ideal answer for this, right? So BRD is a set of requirements so which we have gathered from the end user. Okay, so these could be new opportunities, these could be problems, pain points of the users, okay, or a wish list or a user need. Okay, so these are some things which we have gathered during our elicitation process. So this is a list of what the customer or the stakeholder needs, correct? Whereas FSD is from those requirements, so we convert it into specifications which are more on how these needs will be met um, in the application or the software that we develop. Okay, so BRD is more about what is required. FSD is more about how we will achieve what is required. Okay, so that's the difference. So you can explain with an example. So we discussed the net banking example, right? So where we gather requirement and then we convert it into FSD.
And Ravi, also I think the BRT never changed. So the business requirement never changed. However, uh, FRD can be changed if we are going to, I mean, use a
Yeah,
different solution, right?
yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, so people can ask you, so do you know what is the difference between a test case and a use case? I think only Anshuman and Vijay are answering everything, right? And sometimes Mavisha, maybe it's good if others can also give a try.
So this use case is like a definite kind of a specific task kind of a scenario use case, and test case is like uh, how to achieve it, kind of like with test inputs and what is should be the expected result, kind of. That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
test case.
that's right. Yeah, so test case is something, so test case is a mechanism where we can validate whether the solution that we developed is working as expected or not. Okay, so these are a set of validations that we need to perform in order to make sure that we are meeting the business need, right? And whereas the use case is more about more of a UML diagram, which explains the interaction between an actor and the system. Okay, so use case can so in a typical use case, you'll have one or more actors, and then you'll have multiple use cases. And there could be two types of relationships between use cases. So one is includes, the other is excludes. Includes is this, excludes is this. Okay. So that's how you will make the most of every question that they ask you, right? So you explain everything you know whenever they ask it.
Okay, and looks like we have to also include various terminology that is related to that term.
Yeah, so, right. So you ask him, they ask you something, right? So you need to tell whatever you know about this, because that way, if they ask you something that you don't know, right, then the interviewer has already created an impression that, okay, this guy, if he knows something, right, he knows the foundation and he has like in-depth knowledge on the topics he knows. So that means even if he doesn't know like one or two, he can still manage, right? And they will give you the opportunity.
Yeah, makes sense.
Ravi, we can see that a use case is expected result and test case is actually the
This
actual
is
result
Mavisha.
after
So
validation.
no, the interviewer will not accept that answer because this is not a multiple choice question, right? So you should be able to speak for at least 2 minutes when you are explaining test case and use cases. Okay.
Okay. Okay, in a sequence where I had to explain what is the difference with an example. Correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So what do you guys think? Should we revise this, or should I mark it as done?
Yeah, we will revise it, Ravi.
Okay.
Again, we'll refer
Yeah.
back to old videos and we'll get back.
Okay. So you said you follow Agile and Scrum, right? What are the different roles that you have in Scrum?
So basically, as far as Agile is concerned, we have a three main role. One is a product owner, Scrum master, and a Scrum team.
Okay. Then what about business analyst, QA, and developer and all? So what about
Development
these
team.
roles?
So in Agile world, we don't have a different role as far as tester and developer is concerned. But sometimes when we have a domain extensive project, sometimes we have a PA. But as far as a Scrum guide, we don't have a specific role other than product owner, Scrum master, and the product Scrum team.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay, so that's something probably that's a good answer. So I'll mark it as. Okay, so the other question that is like asked like almost 100% of the time is, how do you what challenges did you face as a face as a business analyst, or how did you handle a challenging stakeholder? Okay, so maybe can you guys think of a possible answer, then I'll give you like my answer. So once you come up with your answer, right, and you can I'll not give you like a structured answer. Probably I'll give you like different hints that you need to follow. Okay, so how do you handle a challenging stakeholder is, so this is an opportunity where you should not just give an answer, you need to create a story. Okay, so for example, something like this. Okay, so where, okay, so when I was working on this, then this happened, and then this was the challenge, and then this is how I solved, and this is the lesson that I learned. Okay, so you need to create it more like a story. So can you think of any situation that happened in your project? So think of a challenge that happened in your project, and then we can convert it into something more relatable. Okay, so probably I think you guys are getting a hang of how the interview would be, right? So um, so these are more of process related questions. Then we'll have situational questions as well, so which will go into detail. So we have another session where we can go into detail. But can you take out some time to go through the recordings of whatever topics we covered, especially your understanding of Agile Foundation, right? That's really, really important. Okay, because for a business